I've got another one of my legendary clients here today. Goes by the name of Marcos Modiano. Have I pronounced your surname right there, mate?
Perfect.
You say it though. I know it sounds different with
Oh,
the accent.
Modiano.
Yeah, Modiano. There we go. All right,
Yeah.
mate. Great to have you on, man. And for everyone watching on YouTube, as you can see, I forced it was non-negotiable for Marcos to get his guns out. You know what I mean? It had to happen.
Yeah, I was wearing a long sleeve t-shirt and he made me change.
But yeah, man, it's great. It's great to have you on. And firstly, let's get straight into just telling us more about yourself, right? And I'd like to get into your career, right? Because a lot of people listening to this, they're high performers, entrepreneurs, people who have really got good motion in their career and stuff. But some of them, unlike yourself and me, they haven't got to the point, Marcos, where they actually are a healthy person. You know your identity, right? You've become a person. For us, going to the gym, we need it for our mental health, right? Keeps us
Right.
sane, and it's just something we do, like brushing our teeth. But a lot of people they haven't quite got to that point. So with yourself, I know you're a psychiatrist, you're a doctor, you specialize in addiction, medicine as well. Tell us a bit more about what you do in your career first, and getting to where you're at, man, because it's a hell of an achievement to get to that level.
Thanks. Well, thanks for inviting me. I'm very happy to talk to you. I mean, even though we do
Pleasure.
these like maybe once a month, but um
It's a
so
pleasure.
yeah, I thank you. As you said, I am an addiction psychiatrist. I live in New York City. Have been here for about 3 years. I used to live in Chicago before that, and have been working with you for about 3 years, I think,
That's
close to
right.
three
Just over
years.
3 years. Yep.
And yeah, I mean, my day to day is I'm a physician. As you said, I trained as a psychiatrist, and then I did a training in addiction medicine. And that is my professional background. Personally, I was born and raised in Mexico. Moved to the US in 2008 and have been here ever since. And again, in New York for 3 years.
There we go. Well, half the audience, minimum, actually even more, are in America anyway. So let's take a step back into. I like to go into the studies, right? Because again, getting to the level where you've gone to medical school and you've grinded out to get to the level you're at. Tell us a bit more about that experience, and then after that, the transition from where you were living in Chicago to New York. I'd like to hear a bit more about that.
Sure. Um, Honestly, growing up, I never thought that I wanted to be a doctor. Until maybe my my last year of high school. That is when I decided that maybe, being a physician was what I wanted to do. And thinking back, I now recognize that the reason why I wanted to become a doctor more than anything was to avoid social situations. It was a good excuse to avoid social situations. I have to study, I have to be in school, I cannot go out, I cannot spend time, in social settings. So, uh, but that is now thinking back. At the time, it was I wanted to achieve something, I wanted to, make my parents proud, make myself proud. And I was always a good student, so I was like, well, medicine sounds good. Why not? I went to medical school and I performed really well in medical school. When I finished medical school, I kind of like hit a roadblock. I really didn't know what I wanted to do in terms of training. After finishing medical school, at least in the United States, you do your residency and you trained as a specialist. And when I finished medical school in Mexico, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I actually decided that I wanted to be an OBGYN, and I did maybe like 6 months to 7 months of the training. And while I was in that training, I decided that that was not for me, not for any other reason, but because I really wanted to have a life work balance. And that specialty is very demanding of your personal time and obviously your life in general. It takes over your life, and I wanted something that had a little bit more balance. However, before I switched, I had my first depressive episode around that time. That was in maybe in 1990, no, sorry, around 2003. Yes, 2003. I had my first depressive episode. I was diagnosed with depression. At the time, I was feeling like I was a failure. I had failed myself. I had failed my parents, my community, like my medical community, because I decided that that was not for me. And I started like struggling with my mental health a lot. I was having suicidal ideation or suicidal thoughts. I was feeling extremely despondent, hopeless, helpless, worthless. Um, and I was in a very, very vulnerable state. And I mean, I had a very supportive family, and at the time they helped me find the help that I needed. So I started seeing a psychiatrist. I started taking medication, and uh, through that therapy, or through the therapy that I was doing with a psychiatrist, I fell in love with psychiatry, and I fell in love with mental health. And that's when I decided that maybe what I needed to do was related to mental health, because if I had been able to be helped, I could help other people. So that is, and I apologize about my dog. He's like really bothering me. And he's
It's all
not
good.
going to sit still otherwise. So yeah, I mean, that is how I decided that maybe what I wanted to do was something different. And uh, I mean, fast forward a couple of years, I moved to the US with the intention of taking the boards to become a doctor in the US. I did those in a span of like 2 to 3 years, and I interviewed in different programs for psychiatry, and I became a psychiatrist. And 4 years later, I was training in addiction psychiatry or addiction medicine, and um, yeah, I finished my training, and obviously I'm going too fast on the whole thing because the training is grueling. It's a lot of hours, a lot of time that you have to put on in the hospital and taking care of patients and learning and studying, and um, you're on call, so you sleep in the hospital every third night. And eventually, things started getting better after training. I started working in a private practice, and mostly focusing on addictions. And addiction, I mean any kind of addiction, mostly substances, but I also started working with some behavioral addictions like gambling, um, uh, pornography, and other behavioral addictions like those. And yeah, that's kind of how I got where I am.
Yeah, man, that's a really interesting story. And there's a lot of men right now in particular, women too, of course, but mainly men. If we go back to suicide, you mentioned you had suicide ideation. There's a lot of men, I think it might be every 8 hours, every 7 hours, a man commits suicide here. And in the US, I think it's even at a higher rate per person, per man, you
Yeah.
know, the leading cause of death, even in the UK, is the same thing, is men aged over the age of 20 or something like that is by their own hands, man. It's a crazy stat. And you must see a lot of stuff with what you deal with, right? With addiction in particular. Firstly, I want to hear more about you, right? If you're happy to share in terms of your mental health struggles and maybe if there was a place where you got to like the darkest place. I know you said you had a major struggle. You realized during your studies and everything else, I'm depressed. Can you remember like a lowest point, if you don't mind sharing? And then just fast forward to now in terms of how you manage your mental and emotional health. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know your dog helps a lot, right? Big Theo. You know what I mean? He's got
Yeah.
a lot to answer for, haven't he? Huh? If you can see on
He
YouTube.
wants he wants to be famous. Uh, he, so when all of this happened, this was also in parallel or in tandem with me coming out as gay. So,
Okay.
it was coming out as gay, quote unquote, failing in my career. So there was a lot of different things happening in my
Mm.
life. I was in my early 20s. I was feeling extremely vulnerable and um, I really didn't see a way out. And thank God I never got to the point of, attempting suicide, but I did think about it. And I did think about how I could end my life and how I could get, um, you know, out of like my suffering. And as you were saying, that is not uncommon. Actually, your statistics are not wrong, and I could add that 1 in 10 people actually complete suicide, if not a little bit more, depending on the
Wow, that's even more of a
the
crazy stat. 1 in 10.
1 in 10 out of all the people that have suicidal ideation. I'm not saying that 1 in 10 the whole population, if that makes
Right, got
sense.
it. Yeah, but even so, that's still a crazy stat.
Right. It's like 10% of the people, right? And there are many signs that lead uh, to me as a doctor to recognize as someone who's at risk of suicide. Men, as you said, are at higher risk than women. I mean, women attempt more, but men complete more than women.
Sure.
Um, and that could be for many different reasons. One is because women attempt with means that are not as deadly, like pills or cutting. That doesn't mean that they don't succeed. They can succeed, but men tend to attempt with firearms, more frequently
Especially
than
over
not,
there because
or
it's so readily available, right?
right, or hanging even, So
Mm,
these are and this full disclosure, I know that this could be very sensitive for some people, but I think it's important to talk about it.
let's go.
Also because substances play an important role in completed suicides, and
Absolutely, yeah.
men tend to have higher rates of substance use than women. Another risk factor for men is age. The men in their 50s and 60s tend to have higher rates of suicide than younger men. Um, Although that doesn't mean that younger men do not complete suicide. Um, and also like loneliness, the lack of support, what we call in psychiatry protective factors against suicide. Those are important to always look for. Like protective factors are the belief in a higher power or in God. That is a protective factor, or having um, faith or faith-based beliefs. All of that is a protective factor. Having a family is a protective factor, particularly children. Um, but you know, pets actually, believe it or not, are protective factors. Um, and having a job is a protective factor. Being better off economically or financially is another protective factor. So all of that also makes you think about the risk factors for suicide, right? So loneliness, poverty, homelessness, or now we call it people who are unhoused rather than homeless. These are risk factors for suicide. So um, when or back going back to me, when I was having these intense thoughts, it was um, the intrusive nature of this was what was so challenging. It was constantly, and it was this thought of like I just want to die. I don't want to be here anymore. I really didn't know or think that there was anything to live for, although there were many different things to live for. But at the time, you are in such a dark spot that you really do not see um, the light at the at the end of the tunnel.
Hmm.
You just like live in this dark um, room, and it's very hard to see what really um, is there outside or is there on the other side, as I was saying before. So um, I had a supportive family. I shared with them how I was feeling, and they supported me. I started seeing a mental health professional. I was prescribed medications. I started doing therapy pretty frequently. And, fast forward to now, I still take very good care of my mental health. I prioritize it over almost anything else. I see a therapist twice a week who has been my lifesaver, and I've told him that many, many times. I also have a psychiatrist, and I take medication for depression and anxiety. And I have learned with time to take care of myself, and taking care of my body is also taking care of my mental health, and vice versa. So if I'm taking care of my mental health, I know I'm taking care of my body, and if I'm taking care of my body, I know that I will be prioritizing my mental health. And all of this ties into, what we're talking about, which is exercise, right? Exercise and my physical health have become a priority as well. That is my way of uh, that is the best way that I can take care of myself.
Like a
I
coping
have
mechanism, the best coping mechanism.
totally, and I have developed other hobbies, if you want, to take care of myself. And I have recognized how much these help. Like, this about myself, but people that are watching or hearing or listening probably don't. Uh, I I do ceramics. I became a ceramicist, or I consider now myself a ceramicist, like about 3 years ago when I moved to New York. And this was as a suggestion from my therapist, actually. He said, you need to meet people. This was post-pandemic. I had just come out of a relationship, had moved to a new city where I really didn't know anyone, and he suggested to engage in some kind of activity where I could meet people. Um, just as a side note, I never ever consider myself as an artistic person.
Same.
So when he said that, I almost like punched the camera on the computer. I was like, "What are you talking about? This is absolutely the worst
You don't know
idea
me. I thought you
ever."
knew me, but you don't know me at all.
Right. It was like, this is the worst idea ever. Like, I am so into cleanliness, and you are wanting me to go get dirty with mud and with uh with with water and and paint, and this is a terrible idea. But as I said, he has always like guided me very well, and I said, well, there's nothing to lose. I'm just going to try it. And I tried it once and I fell in love. And I've actually made really, really good friends through that. Um, so it's been all comes full circle to how I take care of myself, I think, and how I was when I was feeling extremely depressed and feeling suicidal, to how I feel now. I am very grateful that that part of my life is behind, but I am also very grateful that it happened, because it taught me resilience. It taught me strength, and in a way, it helped me learn more about myself. Because without that specific situation, I probably would have engaged in therapy, but not to the with the frequency that I started doing it, and you know, uh, getting to know myself and getting to know my environment a little bit better.
Interesting, man. Yeah, I want to touch. I mentioned my issue before, or my challenge, should I say, with mental health, but I do want to reinforce it, man, because it's a message that needs to get out there. And I feel like there's still a stigma attached to it, even though it's got a lot better now with the awareness of men's mental health in particular. There's
Correct.
still stigma and shame attached to it for whatever reason. And I was the same. There's something to be said as well, like you said, about being fragile, or at least you don't really know yourself that well, right? Your brain's still developing when you're 22, 23. I was the same age. I was 23 when I went to my darkest place for about a year and a half, I think it went on for. And like you said then, it really resonated with me when you said you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. And I was in the same place. Fortunately, like yourself, I got a strong bond with my mother, my family, right? Basically my mother and my sister. And I remember her saying to me, you'll get through it, you'll get through it. But I didn't believe it, man, at all. I was trying to keep a
Yeah.
brave face. And I remember there was one time we were in a coffee shop and my mum and sister were there and they both just broke down crying because it'd been like a year at this point where I was getting these intrusive thoughts. It's interesting how common it is as well, man. I've got a mate, we go back and forth, and like we found a way now to like joke about it. You know what I mean? Because he gets some, even recently I had some. It's how you manage it though, right? I think over time, like you say, number one, you get more resilient. Number two, you learn how to manage the thoughts, right? Because the thoughts are not you. And it's easy to say, but when you're in it and you're struggling and you're anxious and you maybe haven't got the right support system around you, you add on top of that, fortunately for myself and you, we've got purpose in that way, right? Where we're actually, especially
Right.
with what you do and what I do, we're on the front line kind of in a different way, helping people. We get some purpose out of that, but a lot of people haven't got that. So yeah, just all that to say, I didn't see light at the end of the tunnel. I didn't believe I would get through it. And then eventually I did. And that's kind of like another conversation. So, but for me, it was having a support system as well. Like I had someone to talk to about it. I had my friends around me
Mhm.
at the time who I didn't talk to about it. I didn't say, because back then there was even more stigma. This is, you can probably relate to this. I know you're 46 now, my man. Yeah, you got a couple of years on me. But even when
A lot more than a couple, but yes.
you got 8 years on me to be precise. You never guess. The audience would never guess you're 46, on man. You get away with bloody in
Right.
your 20s, to be honest, man, with that baby face. Something in those genes there, mate, in Mexico. I don't know what's going on there,
Right.
or all the weightlifting or something going on there. But yeah, man. But that was it, mate. So back then I didn't talk about it, but I had a support system. I still lifted weights, so I still had that as the foundation, like yourself. Which at the time I didn't really look at that because that was almost something I just did at that point anyway. It was a habit, but without that, God knows how much harder that would have been, right? So I think it's important for people to understand that. But going back to what you said then about mental health, managing it, and what you do now as coping mechanisms, right? So we talked about exercise. What else do you do to manage your mental, emotional, and spiritual health? You mentioned faith as well, which I would like to touch on.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a couple of things. First is if anyone that is listening or watching experiences any of these um things, depression, suicidal thoughts, there's help. And I apologize about my dog. He's very needy, as you can tell. Um, but there is help out there, and shame leads to not reaching out for help because we are taught as men, particularly, that we can or should do things on our own, or that we should just, man up or toughen up and really not ask for help. And that is where, the cycle of um, depression and all of the other signs or symptoms that we're talking about can lead to dangerous situations or outcomes like suicide. Um, but you were asking how else I take care of myself, and I think like speaking of vulnerability and what I do or what I should do, but I really don't do. Another one of my coping mechanisms, and I've talked to you about this, is I tend to engage in binge eating pretty regularly, actually. It's not a self-care strategy per se, but my brain tells me that is going to help me feel better about myself, at least for the moment or when it's happening. I recognize that I tend to binge eat more when I feel lonely. I binge eat when I feel sad. I binge eat when I feel tired. Um, Actually, in addiction, we talk about um, in the 12-step community, the
Yep.
AA community, they talk about triggers, and these triggers are better exemplified by the letters HALT, halt.
Yep. I've
Uh,
heard that. Hungry, angry, lonely,
Hungry,
tired.
angry, lonely, and tired, correct.
Yep.
And I added, and this is not something that I have read or somebody has told me about, but I added in the H the word horny, because when people are, sexually aroused and they don't have a partner or they don't have a way to um, um, take out that arousal, they can engage in addictive behaviors. So hungry, horny, angry, lonely, tired. So those for me are the signs. I know that I would binge eat or engage in those quote unquote addictive behaviors when this is happening. So so sorry about my dog.
It's all good,
He's
man.
really not letting go.
He's not
Um,
having it. He wants to be. He wants to be on the
no,
podcast. Look,
yeah, I mean, I apologize though.
that's all good,
Um,
man.
so, so yeah, I mean, I think it's important to recognize that those are triggering situations, you know. I was telling you about, situations in which I know that if I have forgotten sweet or I don't prioritize food during the day, I tend to binge eat at night. That is another thing. I also have attention deficit disorder, and people with ADHD or neurodivergent people like me or like myself, we tend to not plan, or we want to plan, but it's hard for us to plan. We throw what we call executive functioning. So because of that, a lot of times people with ADHD have binge eating episodes because during the day they forget to eat or they don't prioritize eating. And then at the end of the day or the end of the evening, they start feeling hungry and they just binge.
Hmm.
And also the medications that are used for ADHD tend to be appetite suppressants. So during the day, people don't eat much. And then in the evening, they start eating ravenously. So yeah, I mean, you were asking what other ways I see of taking care of myself. So binge eating, even though it's not a self-care activity per se, I identify it as a way of taking care of myself sometimes.
Yeah.
Also spending time with my dog is self-care for me. Taking him on walks. When the weather is nice in New York, especially in the summer, we go out on many, many walks. I try to get like at least 10,000 steps in every day. And I have learned to meditate. I don't do it as often as I should, but at least I try to do breathing exercises every day, mindfulness exercises every day, or practices every day. And I also enjoy reading. Those are my self-care activities.
Yeah, love it, man. Let's get back into food though, because most people relate to that, right? That's the biggest struggle for most people is the behaviors with food. And there's no one that I know of anyway. There may be a few who are perfect in that area. For the most part, you make good decisions, right? So for the most part, it's automatic now for you to hit protein, have enough protein. You eat whole foods primarily, right? So give us more detail on number one, how your day looks like with your structure of food. Because I know you said it's harder to plan with the ADHD and everything else. I know we've had meal prep companies and stuff like that help you, right? Which is easier
Yes.
anyway. And two, with the food decisions you make, what the thought process is behind that. I know you said it about it's interesting though, right? Because that is the biggest coping mechanism for most people. But you're in shape, right? You take care of yourself for the most part. But a lot of people they don't.
Right.
They use it as a coping mechanism, but they don't do the other stuff, right? Which
Right.
is and there's levels to it as well, right?
So, in order to talk about that, I mean, I can talk a little bit more about addiction. And even though
I
binge
wanted to go
eating
there
is
anyway,
not,
so it'd be great if you can tie that in there. That's awesome.
yeah, even though binge eating is not, consider addiction per se, it's an addictive behavior. The way that I learned and the way that I teach my patients to understand addiction is by thinking about what I call the four C's of addiction. Or in general, like it's not only me, many people call these as the four C's of addiction. It's cravings, compulsion, consequences, and control. So cravings, compulsion, consequence, and control. Cravings, you want to use the substance. In this particular instance, I want to binge eat. I want to eat foods that are not the healthiest. I want a, an Oreo cookie or a cookie of some sort. Um, and I'm craving it. My brain is telling me, "Ooh, that cookie sounds good." Compulsion is, the act of engaging in that craving. So I compulsively eat. The consequences is how I start feeling full. I know that I'm going to be feeling full. I know that I'm going to feel uncomfortable. I know it's going to be harder for me to fall asleep and stay asleep. If I binge eat, I know that I am going to feel uh, really uncomfortable, but I still engage, and that is where the consequences part of this all is. And control, I lack control over the behavior, or I attempt to control the behavior as well. And if you understand these four C's, you can understand a little bit better what the mechanism of addiction is and how the brain kind of is hijacked by the need to engage in these kinds of behaviors. Um, why food, or why was I talking about binge eating? Well, food, or the act of eating also stimulates the release of dopamine in the brain, and dopamine is that neurotransmitter that um, it's part of the reward system of the brain. We all have it. Dopamine is released when uh, we do activities that are rewarding, or when we engage in situations that are rewarding. Um, Speaking a little bit more, you know, uh, uh, about the origins of this, like the evolutionary origins of this. Dopamine is or the reward system of the brain is a system that, in a way, um, uh, helps us survive. So it's a survival system. Why? Because without it, we would not enjoy food. Without it, we would not engage in sex and reproduce and have children. Without it, we would not. Um, uh, do certain things like exercise, right? Because dopamine is released when we have these kinds of, or when we engage in these activities. Hence the running high, or the runner's high, or the post workout high. Is the dopamine in your brain being extremely activated. And obviously, dopamine is released with these activities, but substances elicit the release of dopamine at much higher levels. So let's say that food releases dopamine at a 50% of your top levels. Cocaine will release dopamine at maybe 120, 300%, right? So it's much more rewarding, it's much more enjoyable. And people that engage in those behaviors want to re-experience that experience. And that is where the cravings, compulsion, consequences, and control issues happen. And that is, I think, a good way of understanding to understand addiction, and why, at least with me, I don't struggle with any substance use disorders, but I engage in binge eating, and the binge eating, in a way, helps me understand a little bit better what my patients feel when obviously the consequences are not the same. It's not the same feeling full than ending up in jail, or losing your house, or losing your marriage, or even having medical consequences from substance use. But it helps me understand a little bit better their experience.
And it is interesting. So what you said then, so you said 50 times, what was it? The amount released for the reward of food versus 100 to, was it 100 to 23? What was
I
it on
I
the cocaine, roughly?
Yeah, I just gave you it would be easier for me to explain it if I had a graph, but
Yeah,
I
yeah.
can just tell you that let's say that food, like if we imagine dopamine in molecules, 5 molecules of dopamine are released when we eat. When someone uses cocaine, 120 molecules of dopamine are released.
Got
So it's
it.
much, much higher.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
much
Over
more,
double.
so the brain gets basically flooded by dopamine. And this flooding of dopamine is so intense and so rewarding that people that uses cocaine in this particular example, want to re-experience that. The same thing happens with alcohol. The same thing happens with opioids. Obviously, there are other neurotransmitters that are activated as well, but in general, we talk about the reward system and we understand it through dopamine.
And on that point there, then with food, it is interesting though, right? Because I would argue if you look at, well, you can debate this or give us your expertise, but it's probably the most abused drug on the planet right now if you look at food, right? Because you've got ultra processed foods which hijack your brain, particularly in America with the food regulation. Well, there's no food regulation there by the sound of it. In America, it's even worse, right? The stuff they add into the foods there, it is a drug and it's not food. You could argue, not even argue, it's not food, it's chemicals, which are just edible. And essentially, we look at the metabolic health or the metabolic disease epidemic right now. We've got autoimmune, which is related. There's a lot of relation, and a lot of that is linked to metabolic health anyway. Obesity is higher than ever. People being overweight, battles with food
Right.
addiction. It's worse than ever, right? So that probably would you how would you kind of discuss explain that in terms of a drug, because it is used as a drug, right? It's the same thing in a sense, just different consequence, like you say.
Right. I'm not a nutritionist, so I'm not super acquainted with really what happens, or rather like what is it that we respond to in those circumstances. But I can tell you that sugar is uh, stim a, s- it stimulates the release of dopamine. So if we tend to, want it, just you can ask anyone out there, when they go to a coffee shop and they see these delicious cookie or these delicious piece of cake, they would start craving it more times than not. Why is that? Because the reward system gets activated. They think, oh, this looks good. This looks appetizing. This looks rewarding in a way. And that is why we engage in those behaviors. I mean, it's part of the human experience. Not everybody has experienced these rewarding effective substances or behaviors, or or behaviors in some uh, way or form, right? It just happens. It's an evolutionary part of the brain. It's part of the evolutionary functioning of the brain, as I was saying before. It's a survival mechanism of the human beings. So we all experience, in a way, behaviors or use of substances that becomes addictive, or that can be qualified as addictive
100%.
rather.
Yeah, man. And we've both been there, and with food as well. I've talked about it a lot. But when I look back at my history, it was partying first, binge drinking mainly. And, whatever comes with partying, right? Going hard, not sleeping much, like sabotaging essentially,
Right.
taking it to that point because of the environment and the UK, the drink culture, but also just the fact that some of it's in your DNA as well. I've got a lot of addiction and stuff in my family. So there's lots going on there. But then what I did then is I transitioned that into bodybuilding, which is, again, it's another addictive thing. And not being consciously aware at the time, I was addicted to likes on Instagram, right? Which is another conversation altogether with social media, which we can maybe touch
Right.
on. But I was getting that dopamine hit from all the likes, man. I'm getting all these thousands of followers for me having my shirt off. Oh, this is rewarding. Let's go all in with this. And I was doing the
Right.
bodybuilding, for a bit of a purpose to kind of build an online business and stuff. But the reality is, I was lying to myself. If I said to myself back then, "Oh, yeah, that's the number one reason," I would have believed it. But it was bullshit. I was looking for dopamine hits, validation, all those kind of things that come with it. Then obviously food. So then it became binge eating. Then with all the competitions that didn't do me any good physiologically or psychologically when it comes to
Right.
restriction. And then it was binge eating for 18 months after that. And then finally, in my late 20s, I started slowly balancing out, but there was a lot of ups and downs since there. But you can still have that pathway, and you can even transfer that into work as well. There's actually a term, I don't know if you've heard of it, called success addict now. It's actually a term
Correct.
where, so there's lots of these things going on there. But all that to say, we can get addicted to lots of different things. And I wanted to just touch on that as well. So you mentioned pornography, gambling. There's all these different vices that people have. Tell
Yeah,
us
and
if
in
you,
this
you don't have to, I know it's confidential, a lot of it, but tell us what you've learned over the last however many years about
Yeah, I
addiction.
mean, I can give you 1,000 examples of like people that I have worked with that tell me that they stop using one substance or one behavior, and they substitute that substance or behavior for a different one. We call that cross-addictive behaviors. It's not uncommon for people, for example, especially people in early recovery. They go to treatment for alcohol use or for cocaine use or any drug use. And they come out of treatment and they start engaging in shopping, for example, spending money. in an addictive way. You know, they have the craving to go buy stuff. They engage in the compulsive behavior. They have consequences, and they lose control or want to control the behavior. Um, Shopping, gambling, exercise is not uncommon. Dieting is not uncommon. Another one that is not uncommon is engaging in sex, or in pornography use, and even work. You know, a lot of people um, go in these like hyper focus mode in work that they start using as a substitute for their addictive behavior. um, Obviously, there are uh, better behaviors than others, right? I mean, the consequences from overworking or working too much are not the same as the consequences from gambling because, you are not going to be losing or betting or spending money on games, of any sort. But your relationships can be affected because you're not prioritizing your relationship with your partner or with your kids. Um, so, so if you think again about these behaviors in terms of these four C's, I think it's easier to understand what addiction is, and without going into the brain functioning and all of the neuropsychiatric changes that the brain goes through with addictive behaviors. But I think it's just easier to understand that it's not uncommon for anyone to substitute one behavior with another, as you were saying in your particular experience, bodybuilding, food, um, drugs. There are different things that could be substituting with one with the other. So yeah, it is not uncommon at all.
Yeah, it's actually very common nowadays, isn't it? So yeah, man. So just to give us a bit more and the audience a bit more of an insight into how you live day to day, and people want to hear how you stay in shape, how you stay healthy. And when I say stay in shape, it's physically, but like we just touched on, it's mentally as well, right? And it is all one ecosystem almost, isn't it? You're not going to really have one without the other properly because you have to
Correct.
train physically, you have to be physically strong, physically fit to have more stable chemicals, like you said about dopamine, endorphins, all those things that are released when you exercise. And it has been, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe there was research to show, all in all, that exercise was actually more effective than most antidepressants. Obviously, there's going to be variety for each person, but in general, more effective, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would say it's more effective, but it's very effective. And it's very effective again because it does stimulate the release of neurotransmitters, particularly dopamine, or what we commonly call endorphins. So there's release of those, and those
Hold on, let me
make
ask
us.
you. Let me ask you on
Sure.
that, man. Sorry to interrupt, but so I thought that just to give me a bit of education and the audience, dopamine is kind of like the reward is the pursuit. It's
Hmm.
getting stuff done, survival, eating, sex, those kind of things, to chase those things. But I read in the book that actually I think you recommended to me. I can't remember what it was called now. The here and now hormones, right? Endorphins, I thought were a different category to dopamine, but you just said it's also known as endorphins.
Well, endorphins are also opioid-like neurotransmitters. We call them opioid-like neurotransmitters because they do have an effect on managing certain uh, functions of our brain and our body. For example, endorphins need to be released for pain relief, for mood regulation, for stress reduction. They have an effect on immune function, and uh, they kind of like, we call them the intrinsic painkillers. They are released. Uh, they're released in uh, as rewarding neurotransmitters too. So um, they're just essential neurotransmitters that play a role in those things that I was telling you about: pain relief, emotional regulation, et cetera, et cetera. and we commonly say that there's like endorphin release when we exercise. Why is that? Because, it does, we do have a release of those internal opioids in our brains. And that is why sometimes when people are exercising or over exercising, they don't feel pain until afterwards because endorphins are being released. Um, it's not
So it
uncommon, for
acts as
example,
a painkiller, essentially, right?
right. And it's also something, it has an effect on how you feel emotionally. It does have an effect on mood regulation. So if you exercise and there's release of endorphins, you're going to feel good. It helps you feel happy. So there's a lot of like research in terms of like the what endorphins do, as well as dopamine. They're different neurotransmitters, but they are both essential for the functioning of the brain and the body.
Mm.
And there are other neurotransmitters, as you have probably heard about, like serotonin
Serotonin,
and
oxytocin.
oxytocin and other neurotransmitters like why am I blanking now? I have no idea. This is what I deal with every day. Um, but um, there are other neurotransmitters that have that effect or they're important for the functioning of what we call homeostasis, right? Which is that
Mm.
balance of
Yeah.
functioning.
And the body's always trying to find homeostasis, right? Constantly. So
Correct.
tell us a bit more about your day-to-day life, right? So I know you're a busy guy right now. Just to clarify, I know you create a lot of the programs now with what you do and your speciality. You don't actually deal with clients one-to-one anymore, but that's what you did for most of your career, right?
Correct.
How do you deal with it day to day? Let's start with food. How you plan your food around it. I know you're lucky enough, like me, to work from home most of the time. Talk about how you plan your food, how you keep on top of hitting protein and the quality of the foods that you eat. Because you mentioned about binge eating, but you still eat whole foods most of the time, if not all the
Right.
time. And that's another thing. You can actually overeat whole foods, right? Which we've touched on before in our calls, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I am a creature of habit. And if I know what to expect, I function much better. So if I have planned meals, that's the best for me. I am admittedly somewhat lazy, so I really don't like to prepare food. And more than anything, because I don't prioritize it. Not I don't like it, I just don't prioritize it. I prefer spending time doing other things. Um, so I have a meal delivery service, that it has full pretty high protein content meals, and I eat those 2 or 3 times a day, depending on the day. I also make sure to supplement with protein shakes, protein or high protein foods like yogurt and cottage cheese. Um, and so again, because I'm a creature of habit, if I know what I have on the fridge, is less likely that I will binge eat or engage in binge eating. It doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. It does happen still. Um, so that is something that helps me in a way maintain my nutrition levels where I want them to be, or where I need them to be rather.
Mm. And on the day you go to the office, that one day a week is still the one day, right? Just to clarify.
It changed. I now work full time from home, so
Okay.
I
Yeah.
don't
Of
go to
course.
the office anymore. But I just have meals that are planned, and that helps me stay on track.
So if you do, let's say you were to go to the office now, they just said, right, you got to go to the office tomorrow. You got your meal company already helping you. So you just simply grab one or two of those meals, or would you
Right.
take your cottage cheese or your yogurts? What would be the go-to? Because a lot of people, they're not fortunate like us, but we can just work from home.
Right. Yeah, that is correct. So yeah, I mean, I have those things at the ready or at the go, like ready to eat. Another thing that I do is have hard-boiled eggs on the fridge. So if I'm hungry and rather than again, I'm not saying that it doesn't happen, but I try to, instead of going to the pantry and getting a cookie, I go to the fridge and get an egg.
There we
Because
go.
I know that if I feel full, I will have less, uh, or there's going to be less probability of me engaging in binge eating.
100%, man. And for everything Marcos is saying, ladies and gents, it comes down to exactly what you said. It's pre-planning. And this is why I do want to keep hammering this home about the identity thing, right? Because people think getting in shape and being healthy, if you look at like a 12-week, the common 8 or 12-week program, right? The reason why they are flawed is because they don't become the person they need to be within that time. It takes a lot more time. So, for
Right.
example, you might change some stuff, right? Let's say someone's starting from scratch, right, Marcos? Okay, I'm going to drink more water, get better sleep, start tracking my food, and I'm going to go to the gym as well, right? Or let's say they're already training. Habit change takes a long time within itself. So
Mm,
it could take
Very, very
two
long time.
a very long time. Yeah, I think it was 2 to 10 months, or something like anywhere between maybe it's 60 to 200 days or something like that to change one habit. And we're talking about permanent change here, because this, and I know this is your speciality as well, right? Dealing with behaviors, right? Helping people change behaviors.
Right.
And it just, you have to become that person. And from what Marcos is saying, you have the meals ready to go. If you go to the office, you're going to have the food there, especially protein and set complete meals. And that's it's subconscious. You do that because you're thinking like a healthy person. Marcos is a healthy eater. Not that we think that consciously, right? But subconsciously, it's just what we do. It's our identity now. And people overlook that. And that's why people need to be more patient, and people need to focus on changing less habits at once, right? It's one or two at the time, and then getting one behavior and turning it into a permanent habit,
Right.
right? And that takes time.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, what I tell my patients is, um, my dog. Sorry.
now he's just milking it. Now he wants to.
Right.
I'm gonna have to get him on the thumbnail for this episode. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Get more clicks.
Uh, he he needs to get like his fan club. Uh, so you make a good point. One habit or one change at a time is better than trying to make many changes at once, because then you're setting yourself up for failure and disappointment. So what I used to tell my patients is, they would tell me, I want to start exercising. It's like, okay, what do you need to get there? And they said, well, I need to go to the gym. Well, that may be too much for someone who's never exercised. Maybe the first thing that you need to do is, recognize that there is a gym 2 blocks away from your house, walk there and just ask for information. And,
I like that.
next time, go there and bring your credit card and pay the first month. Next time, go there. Yeah, you have paid the first month of fee for the gym. Next time, wear your shorts and your tank top and your shoes and go to the gym. Don't have to exercise, just go there. And little by little, you start adding behaviors until it becomes a habit, and little by little, you're going to be going to the gym to exercise, not going to the gym to ask for information or to pay or just to go, to see what is happening there. I don't know. I just think is important to start with small but achieve. And this is another thing that I always tell my patients: small but achievable goals. You cannot shoot for the stars from the get-go, because you are going to disappoint yourself and disappoint others. So you can never say, or I would tell my patients, don't tell your family members or your partners or whoever is your support network, I'm never drinking again, because that is something, that is not achievable. Addiction, unfortunately, or the disease of addiction, has relapses, right? Relapses are part of the disease. And if we say, I'm never drinking again, which is something that many people do or say, or I'm never using again, or I'm never binge eating again, you are setting up yourself for failure and to fail, and then you are disappointing yourself, and then you get into this shame cycle, et cetera, et cetera. So if you want to make changes, my advice would be start with small goals, small and achievable. So again, if you want to read a book and you've never read a book, don't say, I'm going to read the whole book by next week. Just say, I want to read one page. And that's it. Read one page today. Tomorrow, maybe you will read two, and the next day you may read three or four. And little by little, these will become habitual, and then you are going to be reading books. Um, I know it sounds very simplistic, and I'm like simplifying it, but I
It
do
is simple
think that,
though. The thing is, I would
but
argue it is actually, it's very technical. Obviously, your expertise talking about how the brain works, all that is like the brain within itself, right? It's super complex, but it's actually simple when it comes to making the changes. The problem is people do overcomplicate things. And number two, they try and change. It's unrealistic. It's got to be realistic targets. And I love what you said then about going to the gym. I've said that to clients before. I've used that method where I've said, just go to the gym and that's your goal. The end. You don't have to train. When you get there, if you want to walk out, I'm giving you permission to. Most of the time, once they're there, they'll do something. And then once
of
they
course.
start, they feel better and they keep going. But even if you don't, you still hit the target that you set, right? And that comes back to the dopamine thing as well. I've heard about that. Even ticking things off. I do this every day, right? Crossing it off my list or sometimes ticking it off the whiteboard. It releases more dopamine, right? You need to feel like you're winning.
Yeah, I mean, we all are like chasing dopamine all the time, or that dopamine hit, right? And we are going to find different ways in which we tend to do it because we're human beings and that's what we do. Taking things off, does, help with the reward system because you are like, I accomplished something. Yes, I did it. Um, so again, but I always say small or achievable goals are important. Don't try to accomplish too many things at once and don't try to accomplish your goals from uh on the first day because that is not going to happen, and one of two things are going to happen. One is you're going to disappoint yourself, or two, you're going to hurt yourself or hurt other people.
Yeah, I love that. 100%. Start slow, momentum. It's a marathon, not a sprint, right? And that's where the resilience comes in, though. Because let's be
Correct.
honest, right? There's always, over the last 3 years, right, since I'm coaching you, how many times do we mess up? All my clients mess up. I mess up. Everyone does. But you need to be able to recalibrate and bounce back as fast as possible, right? And like you said earlier, the inner critic, the shame, that's what holds people back because they get stuck in that hole.
Right.
And when you look at any area of success in life, right, is the person who can go, okay, took the hit, let's keep moving. Take the hit, keep moving. So what would you say over the last 3 years since you've been under my wing? What would you say have been maybe what's your biggest lesson or biggest wins that you could share with the audience having been under my wing?
I mean, there are many, honestly. But one of them is, and I have always been a consistent person. I'm a go-getter. Whenever I set goals, I usually achieve them. I've had my failures, of course, but having, and I think I've told you this before, but having accountability is very, very important for me. You and I were actually talking about this earlier today about accountability and how for me it's easier to be accountable one-on-one. It's very hard for me to engage in group setting kind of accountability, because then I start shaming myself or I start comparing myself to other people. Um, so one of the things that I have learned is, accountable, or that I have really valued over the past couple of years working with you is the accountability part. Your availability for me is very important to have someone that I can rely on and I can ask questions and I can, um, the same way that you are asking me about my expertise, ask for your expertise. I am not a personal trainer. I sometimes, I mean, when I started exercising, I honestly didn't even know how to hold a weight. And little by little, I started learning. And with you, I have had, coaching and uh, obviously guidance into how to do things and how to do things too, taking care of my body without injuring myself, because that's another thing that happens to me a lot, unfortunately. I tend to be very impulsive and I want to accomplish many things, and then next thing I know, I'm injuring myself. So being patient with my body or learning to listen to my body, be accountable about food, be accountable about sleep, self-care in general. All of those things I think are things that I have that I really value and have really appreciated since I started working with you.
Awesome, man. Thanks for sharing. And also, what we touched on and what you touched on was self discipline. What we're talking about here is discipline, of course, but self discipline, I always say, Marcos, needs to be enjoyable. So it gets to a point where you get rewarded for those acts of discipline, right? And then it feels a lot easier. Like for us going to the gym, it's actually easy now, right? Because instantly, for example, I don't know about you, instantly this morning, boom, get up. I get to have my double espresso, right, which gives me dopamine straight away. Just thinking about it, bang, I get that. The next dopamine hit, I'm going to the gym, baby. Great. Yeah, okay, it might be painful at times in the gym. Then after that, I'm on a high. It's actually fun. I actually love doing it. You know, it gets to that point, doesn't it? And even eating well, obviously that's always going to be a challenge, but I enjoy eating my meals. I enjoy them. It's not. I don't ever look at it like, oh man, I'm bored. You know.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just planning, having, as you said, discipline, and following advice of people that know what they're doing. I think it's important. As we were saying earlier about suicide, reaching out for help, asking for help, being vulnerable and becoming vulnerable, particularly men, that we tend to not be vulnerable or uh, struggle with vulnerability. I think it's just super important to be able to have another person, even though you're on the other side of the world, another person that I can be vulnerable with and ask for help if I need to. That's very, very important for me.
Very important, 100%. We all need that, definitely. One more thing I want to touch on, just going back to nutrition, because a lot of people, that's the main problem that people struggle with. You eat intuitively now, right? You don't track food. You have tracked food. We've been there, used it as a tool. It's not like it should never be a destination for people anyway. It can be used as a tool. Right now, you eat intuitively. I know naturally you have over 150 grams of protein a day, right?
Yes.
How do you enjoy your meals? I know you have the meals prepped. I know you go through phases sometimes where you intermittent fast. Give us just a little bit more detail on that.
Um, I love eating. I don't know what to say. I I love eating. I love
Don't we
food.
all?
Uh, and I think that when people ask me like, what do you like so much about exercising? Honestly, is because I can exercise and I can
Mate,
eat
I-
whatever
I'm
I
so I'm
want.
so glad you said that. I'm exactly the same. Like I'll train.
Uh,
Oh yes, I can eat more food today.
right.
People don't.
I
They
mean,
think they look at people like me and you because we're in shape. Like no, no, no. We enjoy food. If anything, probably more than you, which is why we
right,
train more to manage it.
right. And I mean, it's finding that healthy balance, right? I don't want to over exercise to be able to eat, or I don't want to burn a certain amount of calories so I can then put them inside my body. It's just finding that healthy balance. But I truly enjoy food and I truly enjoy exercise. And I think that I have also come to recognize that for me, the most important thing is doing these two things in a balanced way, and not overdoing one or the other, because again, I am a person who tends to overdo things. Um, so I think that uh, having a plan, yes, we have done uh, calorie tracking, or meal tracking, and I hate it. I absolutely hate it, and you know
Mm,
this.
mm.
Um,
Everyone
it's
does. Most
is
people do anyway.
is the vein of my existence. I hate it.
Mm.
I can't do it because I just
It goes back to
reset.
it goes
Right.
back to the neuro. What's it called? Is it called neurodiverse? Is that what it's called? Or
Yeah, it's
ADHD, whatever.
neurodiversion.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But
Hmm.
it's that though, isn't it? It's like the tracking, it's the structure, it's the. But
Right.
that's why, like for some clients, for example, what I do now is I'll just get them to take pictures of it. Like some people who like genuinely are really, it's an added stress, and it's
Hmm.
not realistic for some people tracking. Yeah,
Correct.
I think just taking photos sometimes they get people to do, but most people, like the majority of people, like you've done it for long enough, right? All in all, for years you've tracked, right? All in all, on and off. People need to do it and go through that 5 to 10 minutes a day to get that awareness at some point.
Yes.
Yeah, man, it's a pain in the ass, isn't it? Yeah, that makes sense. And that's the thing I want to just kind of wrap this up with. How many calories would you say you average a day right now, if you had to guess? I know last time you said 4,000, but that was overestimated. What are you averaging now?
I would say between 3,000 and 3,500.
There we go.
Um, Depending on the day, obviously there are days in which I uh would eat more. You know, for example, when I was talking earlier about ceramics, you know, I do ceramics on the side on weekends. I would be in the
Which is
studio and I
basically
would be,
pottery, right? I know you didn't mention that word, just pottery essentially,
yeah,
because I don't
yeah,
people are, I wouldn't have known what that meant, but yeah, pottery and
pottery.
ceramics. Yeah.
So there are times in which I go to the studio and I am hyper focused in what I'm doing, and I could be there for 8 hours and really not listening to my body's signals of for appetite, you know,
Mm,
and
because you're in the
really
zone.
dismissing it, right?
Yeah.
And dismiss it, and it's part of my ADHD, and I know that. I know that, you know, so if I plan my meals before I go to the pottery studio, or if I eat or set an alarm on my phone reminding me to eat. Or I have friends in the pottery studio which tell me it's time to go eat lunch, and we go eat lunch, even if it's a sandwich. You know, that at least helps me stay nourished, and that would help me avoid getting home starving and then engaging in a binge eating episode of which I'm going to feel terrible about later on.
And there we go, right? So if you look at Marcos, right, you're pretty jacked. You're eating 3,000 to 3,500 calories on average a day, right? And you're relatively lean as well. So that goes to show, like building muscle and strength, the impact on your metabolism is speed your metabolism up. I'm always trying to hammer this home. It's like we've been lifting for decades, right? And that means because of that, because we've got more muscle on our body than I guess the average person, we can get away with way more food. So I look at it like an insurance policy. You've got more muscle on your body and it allows you to get away with more as well. So
Right.
it's a great place to be, right? Let's be honest. In the day and age we live in, like we say, more food available. And when it comes to having balance, social life, those kind of things, the more muscle you can build, it just makes you metabolically more healthy anyway. And obviously, how physically strong you are indicates how long you're going to live, essentially. It's a big predictor of how long you live, obviously, the physical grip strength test. So focus on strength training as the cornerstone, right, of what you're doing with exercise. Um,
Correct.
hey man, I really enjoyed that chat, mate. I really enjoyed that chat. Where I mean, I'll include the ceramics thing as well in the show notes, and I'll share. Is there anything I can share there for you, or maybe even if it's I don't know whether people. Oh, you're not actually taking on patients or anything now, anyway, because you're doing a different role, aren't you? So
Right.
that's no
Uh,
good.
but I mean, if they want to follow me on Instagram, that's perfectly
Great,
fine. I mean, you can put my Instagram handle there, and I will give you my pottery handle as well. And if you can put it there, and people can follow
fantastic,
me, that
definitely.
that will be fun. I'm always looking for followers.
I love that. You should go check out the ceramics page, though, man. You're doing a cracking job there, man. I saw the Halloween one; that was dope. So definitely,
Thank
I'll
you.
uh, I'll share that in the show notes. Go check him out anyway. And yeah, man, it was great to catch up, mate, and really enjoyed the chat. And just for anyone in the audience as well, I've got the talking about metabolism and metabolic health. I've got the new metabolic assessment now, which takes 2 to 3 minutes to fill out, gives you a score out of 100, and it gives you a plan for your body type. And it essentially shows you exactly what to do to get the fastest results possible. So click the link also in the show notes to get a free metabolic quiz. And also, if you're thinking about working with me, the link is in the show notes. Just apply using the one-to-one link, the form for the one-to-one coaching in the show notes. All right, my man. And Theo and Marcos, let's have one more look at Big Theo. Good to see
Say
you,
hi.
man.
You
All
as
right.
well. Thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure, man. Absolute pleasure.